Cheap, one note, and not terribly exciting. It's not just a seasonal candy anymore. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2019 movie Candy Corn. Now this is my second attempt to review this movie. The first time was a few hours ago, and honestly this is my fourth day of having this stupid cold, and I was approaching this review with a level of snark that I ended up just stopping and moving away from. It's not really the energy that I want to be putting out there. So I have regrouped. I've had my coffee. I've had some tea, some medicine. I just took a shower and blew out every upper respiratory orifice I have. And I'm ready to just go ahead and knock this one out. This cold has been a really weird double-edged sword for me because I finally have the time to watch as many horror movies as I want. But at the same time, getting in front of the camera and discussing this for any length of time, it's tough to do without coughing and so on. So it's an interesting position I find myself in. But regardless, I did watch Candy Corn, and what I found about it was that it was a bit of a mess, and that it suffered from pretty major problems at the most basic level. And before I get into what those really are, let me go ahead and just discuss what this movie is about. This film follows a series of teenagers that are about to engage in an annual tradition of basically hazing the mentally deficient freak peer of theirs. There's some dissent among them that, we shouldn't do this, and then, I thought you were cool, and so on and so forth, and then they basically find their peer of Jacob working for Dr. Death, a traveling horror-themed carnival, and, it's here in town for the Halloween season. And the hazing goes particularly wrong. It gets a little too violent. Jacob fights back and winds up getting killed in the fracas. Whereupon Dr. Death himself basically goes through a ritual to resurrect Jacob and turn him into a revenge-seeking zombie, who then wreaks havoc upon the town and sets about murdering the teenagers that have harmed him. So this obviously, this is written and directed by Josh Hasty, and it takes a lot of inspiration from other movies, especially of the 1970s, 1980s era. This is kind of supposed to be, from what I gathered, a bit of a love song to the, Halloween and Pumpkinhead kind of movies there. So there were some pretty major problems with this movie from the get-go. And taking them all into account, it basically wound up being something that had fairly uninteresting kills, a terribly uninteresting storyline, absolutely uninteresting characters, and just wound up being a bit bland and boring. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about this movie, and one thing that I constantly hear is they did a lot with the little that they had. They had very little budget and so on and so forth. And at the risk of sounding mean, I don't accept that. There are a lot of movies out there that have done far, far more with far, far less. And I'm talking about older movies, too, where they had to rely on actual celluloid film and analog, editing and developing and methods and so on and so forth. I really don't accept a lack of budget for an excuse of having an uninteresting movie, especially when a movie like this, one of the biggest problems that it had could be traced right back to the script. This script needed some massive, massive overhauling, and that costs nothing. It just costs care and time and a little bit of talent, and I really think that this script should have been gone over by peers and rehashed and edited. The biggest problem that I saw as far as maintaining the interest throughout is the fact that I still have no idea, having watched this movie, who our protagonist was. This is a fairly traditional, formula as far as a slasher film goes. We have the evil, we have the people that have caused the evil, we have the people that are now in the crosshairs of the evil, and typically we will have a heroine or basically somebody to rally behind as we follow them in trying to figure this out with, some brief cuts to other characters as they might get slaughtered and so forth, but we're really following them. And this movie really didn't have that. The closest I could really come to was the sheriff of the town, because we mostly followed him. But as the character of Dr. Death, when talking to the sheriff, even pointed out in this movie, the police only come after something has happened. So as far as following somebody, it's mostly reactionary. Something has happened, he goes there, he's not really preventing anything, he's not figuring things out, he's not stopping anything, he's basically just arriving on the scene after a murder has already happened. So it makes for a fairly uninteresting character to follow, and I'm not even really necessarily convinced that that is our protagonist. We really don't spend a lot of time with the Jacob, even the resurrected Jacob, candy corn, what have you, character. We spend more time with the Dr. Death character that brought him back to life, but even then, he's just kind of there. He serves his purpose. He says some snark to the sheriff, and there's really not a whole lot there as far as development or interest. So I really can't figure out who we were supposed to follow, who we were supposed to rally behind, and ultimately that made for a bland watch. It made for something that we really didn't have a character to latch onto and follow through with. So even when there's not being kills, we should have somebody that we are walking through the movie with. As they experience things, as they figure things out, as they talk to other people, we too are now getting involved in the other characters, in the setting, in the plot. And we didn't have that anchor point in this movie. So without a compass pointing north, we just wound up lost at sea. And that doesn't really make for an interesting movie. Now, one of the things that this movie could have done to really offset that is to have some interesting kills. If you're just basically going to have here's an homage to Halloween, Pumpkinhead, and we're just going to have some balls to the wall, gory kills, and that's where the real fun of this movie is going to be, I'm all about that. I am a horror movie review guy. I don't think that every movie necessarily needs to be, The Godfather 2 or Seven Samurai. Have some splatterfest on the screen and make it fun. That's perfectly fine. But this really didn't even have that. The kills that were on screen, they were few, far between, and fairly uninteresting. Well, a lot of them happened even off camera, as the camera was just kind of panned down to the bottom and you saw blood dripping down. So there really wasn't that level of splatterfest fun on this one either. So ultimately, I kind of had to think to myself, well, really, what was the point? Every aspect of this film was underutilized. This movie starred Tony Todd. Okay, that's a big plus in my book. In fact, it's one of the reasons that I clicked play on this movie at all. The poster art was pretty cool, and it starred Tony Todd, so I wanted to give it a whirl. And talk about a character that is just absolutely terribly underutilized. He spent the film as a voice of dissenting reason for the Dr. Death character. Oh, we really shouldn't be doing this. You should, they deserve the truth, and so on and so forth. But it runs counterbalance to his actions. He will, clock somebody on the head with a crowbar and then turn it, like we were going too far. Like, if you really believe that, then what did you just swing the crowbar for? And it just kind of continues on throughout that. Nobody really knew what their place was. The script didn't know what to do with its characters, and we didn't know what to do with the plot as far as the audience goes. So it was a bit of a meandering mess, and I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot I've already discussed, but really the big impact on this one is the intent. I really think this was designed to be an intent of having an homage to the old slasher films of yore, and make this kind of a love song to them while also having its own voice and its own footing. And I just really think that between the lack of coherent plot, interesting characters, or good kills, it just failed. And I found myself bored throughout the film. The acting, not that great, but not so bad that I'm going to go below 10 on this one. Everybody basically just had their one note, this is my character, and I'm never going to deviate from any kind of reveals or expansion or emotion. It's just basically going to be, I'm the jerk, I'm the voice of dissent, I'm the sheriff, so on and so forth. Everybody had their role, and they played it, I guess, well enough to not go below 10. The technical, I wanted to go above 13 with this one, because honestly, the cinematography of this film actually was fairly impressive. When it kicked off, There was a good feel of like the old Halloween movie. You felt the crispness of autumn in the air as the leaves were dropping and so on. It had a good visual feel to it in front of the camera. But as far as any kind of technical prowess that it had, it was offset by how bad the kills were in the special effects. For practical effects and whatever CG they might have had in here that was really not that great. The character design of the Candy Corn Killer himself, it was so-so. I really, as far as the mask goes, it was okay. I've seen a lot better. I've seen a lot worse. So ultimately, the technical winds up with the highest score of the group, but it should have been higher. So all told, a score of 31 out of 100 points, not really one I could recommend. I had high hopes for this one. There have been so many times in which I have been so pleasantly surprised by watching a Halloween-based unknown indie film that just kind of surprised the heck out of me. Trick or Treat's one of them. Tales of Halloween is another one. This one I was really hoping would be along the same ilk, and ultimately it just wasn't, and I really can't recommend it. So that should about do it. That's my review of Candy Corn 2019. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like these videos, please click like and subscribe, and if you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.